Welcome back. So the Commission for Gender Equality is under fire from organizations and activists who would usually be its strongest allies. In a letter addressed to the acting Speaker of the National Assembly, Lechisa Tsenodi, 15 institutions and 32 individuals are calling for the appointment of an independent inquiry into the Commission for Gender Equality's failure to fulfill its constitutional mandate. So why have they fallen out with the Commission? For more on this, we are joined by Sonke Gender Justices Bafana Khumalo. Mr. Khumalo, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. What prompted you to write this letter to Parliament?
Well, there has been a lot of issues of concern to us as members of civil society about the shenanigans at the Commission for Gender Equality, a very important institution in our democratic framework. We have been hearing rumors in the grapevine about the senior staff leaving in the institution, interferences by external bodies that were seeking to almost take over the function of where the Commission should be doing its work. And you must have read in the city press in the past 2 weeks, horrifying allegations that are being made about what is happening inside that institution. We think this is unacceptable in a country where an institution like the CGE is very important to ensure that we advance the cause for transformation and women empowerment. And it is in this regard that we felt we need to reach out to the acting Speaker of Parliament so that they intervene, because one of the institutions, unfortunately, in Parliament, in the form of the portfolio committee that gives oversight on this commission, is alleged to be also embroiled in operational issues at the commission.
I want to take a few steps back and say, after 20 years of existence, as I mentioned earlier, what is it exactly that the Commission should have achieved at this point? So let's go back to its original mandate.
Well, the Commission plays a very important function in helping the state to strengthen democracy, precisely in advancing the cause for gender transformation and equality. Now, there has been some advances in terms of contribution to legislation, policies, but there also have been lots of weaknesses. I think we must acknowledge that. There are still many cases that are taken to the Commission, which is part of its core mandate of investigating and coming up with recommendations and strong reports that will enable those complaints to be dealt with adequately. If you speak to ordinary women that have presented these cases to the Commission, many of them have never received joy. I mean, we have a case involving one high-profile institution in this country, a senior member of that institution who has been allegedly abusing women and staff in the institution, many of whom have been forced to leave the institution. It took well over 2 years for the Commission to deliver a report on that case, and a report which is not satisfactory in our view. And these are the kinds of issues that I think people are worried about in South Africa. If you look at the level of sexual harassment that is happening in institutions of higher learning, to what extent are those being followed up to the T to make sure that there is justice for students, female students particularly, is very, very somber. And I think we can't express joy when such an institution is not living up to what is expected of it. And then we hear the shenanigans of commissioners that are not pulling together, that are fighting amongst themselves, that there's political interference in appointment of staff, in operational issues in such an important institution. We should not be allowing something like that in such a sacrosanct institution.
Yeah, it is disappointing to hear some of those concerns that you are raising, considering as well just the lack of justice for victims of gender-based violence in South Africa. What is it that you think an independent inquiry can achieve?
Well, we think that independent inquiry must be able to identify what are the problems, who is interfering, where are the weaknesses in the institution, so that we bolster it. We think it's important that state resources that go into that institution can really be justified in terms of the outcomes of the work that is happening in the institution. It can't be accepted that political organizations want to deploy people into a commission of this nature, which is a state institution that is supposed to be supporting democracy. It's not a playground for political influence. It must be allowed to do its job as it's defined constitutionally. When a member of parliament portfolio committee writes a press statement about operational issues in Chapter 9 institutions, we are worried. What has the parliamentary committee to do with operational matters which have not yet been reported to them in parliament that are inside the institution? Does it mean that they now have a micromanaging arrangement with a Chapter 9 institution? Surely that cannot be allowed in a constitutional democracy. We want to see the Constitution really living up to its original intention as defined by the law and the Constitution, so that it makes a difference in the lives of many women in this country, particularly, who are suffering every day at the hands of misogynistic statements, toxic masculinities, and many women who sit in the courts simply demanding, access to money for their children because the men have disappeared and are not willing to take responsibility. Those are the functions that this commission should be helping desperate citizens of this country so that they realize justice in their lives.
Yeah, part of my concern, though, is that when we ask for an independent inquiry, we're asking for another oversight body that essentially is going to be looking over a body that was meant to be there for oversight reasons, and that these resources are not trickling down to the organizations on the ground that are working day and night to help women.
Well, unfortunately, we need to correct what is happening. We can't leave it as it is, because otherwise then we continue to pour money into a bottomless pit, which is not realizing its objectives. We think there needs to be the guard of the guardians. In this instance, sadly, we find that even Parliament is finding itself embroiled in internal struggles that are happening within the Commission, which should not be allowed. So we hope that the Speaker will really intervene so that there can be an insulation of this institution, right, so that it can be able to do its function, but also that it is insulated from external influences, because that is very important.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. Certainly something that we'll take a closer look at as a country, of course. That there, Bafana Khumalo, the co-executive director for Sonke Gender Justice. We look at